with a whole lot of truth. The Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and I am very pleased to have someone here today who I actually had the pleasure of meeting at a MAPS conference. And he is a pediatrician in the New Jersey and New York areas. And I'm very pleased to announce that Dr. Larry Palevsky is with me here today. Welcome, Dr. Larry.
Thank you, Erin. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. So, tell us a little bit about yourself. I know you're a pediatrician, but what makes you unique?
Um, I am a regularly conventionally trained pediatrician in New York. I graduated medical school in 1987. I did regular pediatric internship and residency. And the first 9 years, 10 years after I finished my residency, I was an ER physician. I ran a pediatric ICU. I worked in a neonatal ICU. I was inpatient pediatrics. I taught medical students and residents. I went to high-risk deliveries. I was in the neonatal ICU a lot. And I got a really amazing education in conventional Western medicine. But I had questions. And a lot of the questions were for things that Western medicine never taught me. And so when I first learned, maybe 3 years after finishing my training, the body has the innate potential to heal. I had never heard of that before, and I was thirsty. Like, what does that mean? Chiropractors say it, Chinese medical practitioners say it, naturopaths, osteopaths, herbalists, homeopaths, so many people say it. Western medicine had nothing. And I thought, why? Why? What does that mean? And so I just went on a journey of trying to find ways in which we could explain how the body had the innate potential to heal. And I started learning about root causes and nutrition and environment and diet and supplements and medications and vaccines and all the things that are not taught in medical school very much. So diet and environment, and certainly vaccine issues, are not really addressed very much in medical school and residency. And I found all of this science that could help me begin to put the pieces together of how we could figure out where Western medicine teaches that the body has the innate potential to heal. And then I realized the way we treat kids, the way we suppress their symptoms, the way we think everything that they have is an infection may not be true. And in fact, may be false. And we may be hurting them by treating them with suppressive over-the-counter medicines and pharmaceuticals and vaccines, and actually making them worse in the long run. And so when you fast forward to 2026, you realize 1 in 6 children have neurodevelopmental disabilities, and 1 in 31 children has autism, and 1 in 5 is obese, and 1 in 9 has ADHD, and almost 1 in 5 has some mental, emotional, or behavioral diagnosis, and almost 1 in 12 children have at least one allergy. You start to wonder, why? Why are so many kids chronically ill? And is there something that we're doing in our medical practice, in our diet, in our environment, in our air, in our water, in our soil, in our vaccines, in our drugs, in our ways that may be making kids sick? And that's not something that a system that relies on continuing to practice the same way is willing to give up very much. So I think what makes me unique is that I have both the conventional and the more holistic approach to sort of transition kids away from chronic illness towards thriving, towards life. And I love to look at parents and say, I want to help you not be a medical manager of your child. I want to help you go back to becoming a parent. And that's so much fun to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so was there a particular case that came across your plate where you realized that you had kind of an aha moment, like, oh, this case is why I need to kind of alter the paradigm, if you will, and flip this idea of conventional medicine and a pill for every ill on its head?
Sure. Well, I think I finished my residency in 1990 at Mount Sinai in New York. And then I did a fellowship in outpatient pediatrics at NYU Bellevue from 1990 to 91. And so the next 4 years, I was an ER physician, and I went to a conference that pediatric ear, nose, and throat doctors were holding in the New York metropolitan area. And I started to realize that they were beginning to understand literature from Europe that demonstrated that maybe we're treating ear infections incorrectly. And so 91, I finished my fellowship. 91 through 95, I was in the ER. So this was about 1993, 2, 3, or 4. And so when I went back to the emergency room after the conference, I would see a kid who supposedly had an ear infection. I'd give him or her an antibiotic. And then they'd come back because a lot of people use the emergency room as their primary care facility. So the family would come back and the kid would be sick again after finishing the antibiotic. And I was taught, oh, they have a resistant ear infection that needs another course of antibiotic. So I'd give another course of antibiotic. And then a couple of weeks later, the families would come back again and the kid was sick. And I just stepped back and I said, wait a second. These kids don't look so sick that they have a bacterial infection that requires another antibiotic. And so between those observations and learning what I learned at this pediatric ear, nose, and throat conference, I thought, okay, maybe there's another way to treat these kids. And at the same time, Erin, I was also seeing kids in the emergency room who were always sick, always having fevers, always having seizures, always having wheezing. And it was the same family. So I was practically their primary care physician in the ER. And I couldn't do anything for them other than suppress their symptoms. And I would scratch my head and say, why do these kids keep getting sick? Like, is there something that I don't understand about their diets, their lifestyles, their environments, their air, their emotional environment? Is there something I'm missing? And when I went back to my medical school training and my residency and fellowship training, I didn't have anything to go on. So that began this search for understanding of what contributes to health and what contributes to illness. And I started to realize that there was so much more to learn. And I had to use my Western medical training for emergencies and diagnoses and assessments. But my actual treatment plans were no longer, I was no longer finding the gold of help in Western medical teaching. And so I started learning about nutrition and herbs and homeopathy and naturopathy and chiropractic and Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine and all these fields. I'm sorry if I left any out, but I went through as many as I could and realized, wow, Western medicine, oh, it falls short, but it's really great for certain things.
Sure.
And, people would say to me, years later, here we are, 30 some odd years later, well, Dr. Larry, now that you don't practice Western medicine anymore, I was like, are you kidding me? Everything I do is Western medicine. The history, the physical, the differential diagnosis, the treatment plan, but I'm utilizing different tools. But I'm still going back to how the body works, how the body presents itself with symptoms, what needs to happen in order for the symptoms to go away, what are the root causes. And it's fascinating to watch how kids can get better. and literally watch parents go from doctor visits and doctor visits and doctor visits and pills and pills and pills and injections and surgeries to living and thriving. And that's the fun of it. That's so exciting to watch.
So, in your years of clinical practice, have you noticed, or what have you noticed specifically about the population of children that's coming through your doors? Obviously it's pretty just observable that we're seeing this rise in a variety of ailments, but just from observation, with the people who come through your doors, what has shifted in the last, say, 25 years or so?
Okay. So I'm going to go all the way back to when I was 10 years old, growing up in Queens. And I was in fifth grade, and I worked with this teacher. Her name was Mrs. Wall, and she and I developed a program for tutoring kids who needed help with reading and math. And she basically looked at me and said, "Do it." I was 10 years old, and I had this book, and I made outlines and graphs of people's names and what classes they were in and what periods we can take them out to get tutoring help and which students in the school were willing and able to help. And I was able to manage it all on my own. Nowadays, there are dozens and dozens and dozens more children who need help with reading and math, and then some. And so I've noticed that well over 50 years of, growing up, watching what was around me. I mean, even as an adolescent in high school, I was able to teach my my fellow students in my classes material that, the teacher, for whatever reason, didn't explain it as well as I was able to. And I enjoyed it because I liked teaching from a very early age. And the number of kids with learning disabilities, the number of kids with reading problems and auditory processing problems and language problems, not just speech, but language, articulation, focus, paying attention, behavioral issues, emotional regulation, physical, like just knowledge of their own body and their space. All those things just started to exponentially worsen. And I remember even in medical school, I remember when it was like February, March of 1986. I was a third year medical student. I was doing a pediatric rotation, and we went up to the 21st floor in Bellevue. And that was where all the children with autism were. And I remember seeing the kids and saying, "Wow, I've never seen this before." Like you didn't see it in high school. You didn't see it on the playgrounds. You didn't see it on the buses, the trains. You just didn't see kids like that. And nowadays, you're seeing many more children with those behavioral and physical issues and learning issues and speech issues. And so there's definitely been a huge, huge exponential rise. And, the data, 1 in 10,000 children with autism by 1980, and in 2026, we're working on 1 in 31. And, before 1 in 31, it was 1 in 50. And before that, it was 1 in 60 something. And before that, it was 1 in 90 and then 1 in 110. And, it just keeps getting worse. And the predictions are that by 2030, 1 in 2 children will be diagnosed with autism. So with that said, I have families who have older children with very bad chronic illnesses. And whether it's autism, ADD, ADHD, or other chronic inflammatory conditions that we see. And they changed the way they raised their second, third, fourth, fifth kids after they realized what may have created the chronic illness in their first or second kids. And so these families became much more I'm sorry, these families grew in number over my years of being in practice. And they could see themselves that the children who were chronically ill were not as healthy, were sick more often, had more medical needs, more visits to the doctor's office than the second, third, fourth, and fifth kids with whom they changed their medical interventions. And even though they changed the diet, they changed the environment, they got air filters, they changed the cleaning solutions, they got EMF blockers, they used different cleaning solutions, they still made major changes to their medical treatment plans. And you could see the difference in the health improvement of the kids who were not getting the same medical intervention as the older children. And the parents didn't need any more science studies. They didn't need any authority. They didn't need any government. They didn't need any doctors. They didn't need any regulatory agencies or journals to say, holy cow, we're seeing a tremendous difference in the health of our children because we stopped this medical intervention and we watched our kids get healthier. We watched our kids resolve their illnesses quicker. We saw these kids were never sick. We saw we never went to the doctor other than for well checks. And these kids were sleeping better, behaving better, learning better, feeling better, emotionally regulated more, fewer chronic illnesses. And so that's what I've seen. These families that, were meeting what we as physicians were identifying 30, 40 years ago, that they were then over the past 3, 4 decades coming to understand all by themselves.
Yeah, and I think, it's interesting because oftentimes I think there's a tendency to want to peg a lot of this decline in our, pediatric health in on vaccines. And um, and 100% I am wholeheartedly on board with that. But there's a number of other iatrogenic causes or man-made causes of these ailments that are impacting our kids on a major, major level. Just anecdotally, my own son was never vaccinated and still had, Dr. Bob Sears said is at the time the worst case of PANS he had ever seen. And so, and I see lots of patients like that as well, parents who've already tried to overcome their environment by not vaccinating, by eating organic foods, all of these things, and still are unable to create, a health for their child in a real meaningful way. From the get-go, it takes a lot of work to kind of bring them back. So tell me a little bit about maybe some of the other issues that you're seeing beyond just vaccines, because that's a huge part of the conversation, obviously. But I think sometimes we negate all of these other things that are potentially harming our kids.
Great. I mean, all great points. Thank you. Certainly, we're becoming more aware of the impact of mold in the environment and how that's affecting children, their regulatory abilities, their bowel habits, their moods, their cognition, their fogginess. We're noticing that. I mean, food has changed a lot, with the addition of partially hydrogenated oils and seed oils and high fructose corn syrup and bromated flour products and GMO crops and GMO wheat and soy and corn, artificial dyes, preservatives, additives, food colorings, natural flavors and artificial flavors, processed foods, the types of sugar. I think I said high fructose corn syrup, but it's worth mentioning again. The amount of packaged processed foods, the convenience foods, where families don't have the time to sit together and eat a cooked meal. They're on the run. So life has changed. The overscheduling, all these activities, the lack of meeting together as a family, as I said, electromagnetic radiation. has really taken its toll. So have devices, kids on cell phones, on iPads, on video games, which has jacked up their nervous systems, but it's also stopped them from being so active. And so, you get these kids who are more sedentary, there's less physical activity, and there's more addictions. And so they're losing social interactions, they're losing emotional intelligence, and they're also losing problem solving and critically thinking because they're easy access to the answers. And they're not going through the process of struggling to figure things out because they don't have to. And that is actually compromising emotional intelligence and social ability and regulation. And of course, you have parasites that are a problem. Tick-borne illnesses are a problem. Geoengineering has become a problem. Soil depletion has become a problem. Pesticides, herbicides. You have emotional stress that has come to great understanding of its impact during pregnancy and beyond. You have dental infections that go unnoticed that people are not as aware of. And I want to go back to something you said, because I have seen kids who are unvaccinated who also have chronic illnesses. But I want to say the one thing that's been left out of the equation is something called transgenerational epigenetics. Now, let me explain what that means in English. It is well known in the literature, in the animal literature, in human literature, that when a stress or a toxin has been presented to a pregnant woman or someone who was either going to be pregnant or soon pregnant, the offspring of those women and men showed the damaging side effects of that exposure. Whether it was a war, whether it was a Holocaust, whether it was mercury, whether it was other metals, whether it was herbicides or pesticides or toxins, they were able to identify in the offspring a pretty significant defect in the offspring. And when those offspring grew up to reproductive age, they then had offspring. And so now we're dealing with the grandkids of the initial exposure. And the side effects, the toxic side effects of the grandchildren were still evident, even though the grandchildren had not been exposed. Then the great-grandchildren were born. And the toxic effect that the great-grandparent was exposed to were still seen 3 or 4 generations down. And so you can see that there's transmission of toxicity effect through the epigenetics and through the generations. And that's without re-exposure. And so when I see kids who are unvaccinated, and even if they didn't get the vitamin K shot or the Hep B at birth, and hoping that the parent, the mother, didn't get the Tdap or the flu shot or the COVID shot during pregnancy, I'm still seeing the transgenerational effects of those toxicities because every generation is re-exposed. Whereas the initial studies on transgenerational epigenetics were just one generation was exposed, and 3, 4, 5 generations down of progeny, you saw the damaging effects without re-exposure. So one has to look at vaccines in that context, because we have no information that explains the effects of serially vaccinating several generations and what that does to each generation of offspring. And as you and I both know, the Western medical powers that be will never entertain that question, because they won't even entertain the idea that there's anything toxic that could be injected into the body in the first place. And I'm willing to have a very scientific discussion with anyone who's interested to really elicit all the toxic effects that we think we know that goes into each vial of vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really interesting point. I mean, we know, for example, that, we carry cells of our mothers and grandmothers and all of these previous generations, and that we carry physical memories, if you will, of those ancestors. And so yeah, I mean, I think it makes perfect sense that everything, all of the toxicity that has been introduced prior to our generations, plays a role. And I guess my question to you would be, how do we overcome those kinds of challenges? Because, obviously I can't go back in time. I haven't cracked the code on time travel yet anyway, but so how do we then impact the epigenetics, not only of ourselves, but of our future offspring?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think as a mother, you're asking, the $1 million question that I get and my colleagues get all the time. And it requires responsibility, as you know, right? It requires not jumping off the bridge because everybody else is jumping off the bridge. So it requires real parenting, which says, yeah, I mean, when you live in other people's houses, you can follow their rules, but as long as you live in our house, you're going to have to follow our rules. And these are our rules. These are the foods that we are going to cook in our home. These are the foods that we're going to serve in our home. And these are the things we're not going to buy for you to eat because we know what goes into your body is very important. And these are the bedtime schedules we're going to uphold. And these are the activities we're going to enforce. And these are the downtimes that we're going to enforce. And we're going to get you outside and we're going to limit your device time. And we're going to make sure that you're grounding. And we're going to make sure that we clean the house of mold. And we're going to make sure that we have good HEPA filters if necessary. And we're going to make sure that we get clean rugs and that our cleaning solutions are not toxic. And we're going to try and use as clean skincare products as possible. And we're going to be one of those families, right? We're going to be one of those that, you'll see that your friends are going to really love being here because they're going to eat real food when they come over here. And they're going to say, wow, your mom really cooked a great meal for us. And they're going to see that you have liberties and you have freedoms, but you also have love and you also have lessons and you also have chores and you also have responsibilities as kids. And we're going to make sure that you are developing your emotions and relationships. And we're not going to let you lock yourself in a room for hours on end, staring into a screen. And if you are, we're going to turn the Wi-Fi off and we're going to make sure we don't have a smart meter. And we're going to get little devices that we stick on the phones and we're going to get Ethernet and not Wi-Fi. And you see where I'm going with this, Erin.
Right.
We're going to make responsible decisions. And we might not even send you to a regular school because we're going to want you to learn through life. We're going to want you to get life lessons. We're not going to want you to regurgitate everything that's told to you, and because we want you to develop your critical thinking. And yes, you're going to look at us and you're going to say, oh, why can't we be like everybody else? And we're going to say to you, because we think the way we're doing things is best for you. And when you're old enough to make those decisions for yourself, you will. But for now, it's our job to make those decisions for you. Well, I hate it here. I know we love you and we understand the battle that you're going through to want to fit in. But again, we're not interested in you jumping off the bridge like the other people are doing. And we hope you understand that, and we'll answer any questions and we'll give you leeway, right? you're going to go to a party and you're going to eat M&Ms and you're going to eat pizza and you're going to eat Kentucky Fried Chicken. Yeah. And then we're going to show you, if you don't feel well, the relationship between what you did and how you felt. And we're going to encourage you to understand cause and effect. Right.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so on and on and on and on and on. And, I was at a conference in Massachusetts in April, and someone asked the panel, which I was on, what advice would you give to parents today? And I said, please parent your children.
Mm.
Because we've lost a little bit of parenting. The tagline for parenting, this is going to hurt me much more than it's going to hurt you. Like, we have to make decisions that are in your best interest. And you're not going to like it, but we have to make those decisions. And that's for your own good. And we'll go into the other room and we'll cry into the pillow and we'll beat the pillow and we'll crawl into a ball and we'll be upset. But we know we did the best that we could to make the best decision for you, because you don't have the frontal brain decision-making potential that we need you to have at 13, at 16, at maybe even 17 or 18. And so my quest is to actually beg parents to start parenting their children.
Yeah, and I think you've mentioned something a few times that I just feel needs to be reiterated. That the vast majority of time, whether I'm working with patients or just dealing with my own household, and by the way, my niece and nephews come over to my house all the time because I cook. And so anyway, anybody who is about to be an empty nester and you still want kids to come around, cook. To give you that is a great tip, because nobody does it anymore.
Right, and get the kids involved, get them in the
Yeah,
kitchen.
yeah. It's so crazy to me, because when I'm working with so many people, one of the biggest um, points of resistance is often around food. It's around cooking. It's around, getting high quality ingredients. It's around eliminating things that might not be healthy for that particular child, whether it's gluten or dairy or, dyes, of course, are not healthy for anybody, but sugars, things that are impacting not only their health, but their behavior as well. And you wouldn't believe, I mean, I'm sure you would, but those of you listening might not believe the amount of pushback that I get from simple suggestions. Um, I'm just curious, how do you, I, I think I know what you're going to say, but how do you deal with that when
Uh,
you come up against parents who do truly want the best for their child, but feel so completely overwhelmed and out of their depth when it comes to suggestions like cooking at home?
right. Well, I think what ends up happening is we're trying to break habits and addictions. I mean, when I've worked with kids, Erin, and they're old enough to make some decisions for themselves, and let's say they had ADD or ADHD, and I'd say to the kid, let me ask you a question. If I told you cucumbers were hurting your attention in school, would you remove them from your diet? Yeah, no problem. If I told you tomatoes were a real problem for your ability to focus, would you take them out? Yeah, no problem. What if I told you milk, cheese, yogurt, and ice cream were really hurting your ability to focus in class? Would you take them out? Absolutely not. And so what that is a hindbrain, reptilian, primitive brain addiction response, because the higher self is gone. Because the higher self would say, really? You think that's going to help me? pay attention? You really think that I'm going to perform better in school? Oh, finally, I have some answers. That's what the higher brain would say. And I'll never forget, I had a 13-year-old boy who was previously diagnosed with PDD-NOS, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. And it was very clear to me that it might help him to get rid of gluten. And he looked at me and said, "No way, Dr. Larry, I'm not going to get rid of gluten." And I looked at him and I said, "Joey, it's really fascinating for me to watch you because I gave you a suggestion that you might benefit from. And you didn't look at me and say, 'Dr. Larry, are you serious? You think that's going to make me better?'" And he looked at me, Erin, and said, "I'm going to do it." A couple of months later, he came back. And before he even said hello to me, he comes waltzing through the door. "Dr. Larry, I have to tell you, I got rid of gluten and I feel so much better now." So there has to be some way to reach the heart because the answer is coming from the head and not the higher head, the lower head, which is, no, if I remove that food from my diet, I'll die. Because that's the answer that you're getting when you make that suggestion. And so what I try to do with families is say, listen, I don't know if this will work. But in my experience, I've seen major changes in kids. And so I'm going to ask you to try something. And I'm going to ask you to explore it and have your own experience. Have it. Don't trust me. Don't trust me. Here's a suggestion. See what happens. I know it can work, and you're struggling with your kid. So why don't you give it a try and then let me know?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what seem like the most simple conversations, I think in today's atmosphere have become very complicated and very rooted, like you said, in um, whether it's just habituated or true addiction, but it's definitely very pervasive is this idea that, well, I need the phone and I need my kid needs the phone. And I mean, I understand it because, you don't want your kid away from you without any way to contact you. For example, we used to have payphones, but like there were other ways to be able to communicate. And I think, we've pigeonholed ourselves into, the fast food culture where, both parents are working and we don't have the time to sit down and cook a meal. The families are overscheduled, so the kids don't have time to, do their homework if they sit down and we have a conversation over a meal. So um, it's a systemic problem, right? Because it's not just about taking out the gluten or taking out the dairy. It's really the emotional conversation about what am I missing out on if I don't have those things, like is it the birthday cake at my friend's birthday party? Is it the pizza at the slumber party? All of these kinds of conversations um, really circle around the emotions surrounding those foods because food is so, intimately tied to community, right?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you know, as a mother, how difficult it is, especially around other families who may have different levels of consciousness around food. Um, but I think that the appeal that we can make to parents is, are you having a hard time with your child's health right now? Are you? And the answer is usually yes. Otherwise, why are they coming? And the thing that I often will say to them is, listen, the road that you're on right now is hard. the road that I'm presenting with the road that I'm presenting to you also appears to be hard. The question I have for you is, which one has a light at the end of the tunnel? And most often the family gets the question because they realize that it's going to be hard either way. But if they stay on the course that they are on, they're going to be spiraling more than if they make changes that they've not previously done. And the thing is that in my experience, once the parent is able to shift, it's really clear sailing a lot after that. Because once the parent gains the confidence and the strength and the backbone, courage to take a stand, there's no going back because they're now seeing that there can be improvement. And you know, as a mother, that as soon as a mother sees that the kid is starting to get better, there's a whole lot of relaxation that goes into your nervous system. And when the mother is better able to hold the house together, everyone's happy.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I know that's a traditional approach, but in my experience, that seems to be the approach that I see all the time, which is, you know, the mother seems to always be juggling 50,000 things. And it's not to say that she doesn't get help, but it's just that she's overwhelmed and, or whoever's playing the mother role, let's put it that way. And these are situations where once the primary caretaker, the day-to-day care of the kid gets his or her footing, the kid starts to get better. And then the road changes, right? The outlook changes, the breath changes, right? The sleep changes, the smile changes, right? The joy comes back, you know, just the whole demeanor. And you know, as a mother, you know, once a mother starts sleeping more, oh wow, everybody's happier. And that's what we need to focus on, and helping the primary caretaker who's doing all the things. Again, whether it's a man or a woman, the goal is to make it so that that person is able to manage better. And yeah, there's
Yeah.
just so much coming at them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to recognize, you know, in root cause approaches, like you mentioned, all the different modalities, we're talking about holistic care, but you know, holistic care really expands to the rest of the family, as you're saying, and I think, you know, so often, you know, I don't hesitate in a scenario where I see mom is really struggling to give mom a remedy also, because I think a lot of times it is mom's anxiety or hypervigilance that is creating a lot of the symptoms for her child, or at least making them worse, to be honest, because it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. It's like, you know, they're walking on eggshells all the time, and well, you know, I think that he's probably gonna, you know, have a rage or a meltdown at around this time because it always happens at this time, you know. So that kind of hypervigilance and extreme anxiety, you know, even PTSD in a lot of situations can really impact the child themselves. And I think it's important to really recognize and understand that, you know, when you're looking at a patient, a pediatric patient, you're not just looking at that patient, you're also looking at the people that are taking care of them.
Sure. I appreciate you saying that because, you know, I will often try to teach parents that children don't learn by what you tell them. They learn by how you behave. they model your behavior, they model your moods, they model your regulation. And so I've had so many parents in the years of practice who were able to recognize that as soon as they changed the way they, put forth their vigilance or hypervigilance, as soon as they became less reactive, as soon as they became less traumatized, the children relaxed more into the home. And I don't think, I mean, in some ways we're just putting more on the parents, but it's actually the biggest bang for your buck. Like when children see that the parents are more regulated, then the children relax and there's less of an environment for inflammation. And that's why when I went through all the root causes, I talked about the emotional environment and how important it is for children to be able to relax into the safety of the environment. And even when moms just give birth, when I teach them, how to breastfeed, I will encourage them to breathe really efficiently while they're nursing. Because in essence, the baby is high adrenaline. And as a woman who gave birth, that you are high adrenaline for a while after you give birth, whether it's your first or your 10th, right? The adrenaline goes up. And adrenaline plus adrenaline is rejection. So think of it as the North Pole of a magnet and another North Pole of the magnet coming to each other. And they're going to repel. And so if you create a South Pole environment to your child's North Pole, then you'll attract. And so when the mother is like scrunched over and holding the breast and tight and barely breathing, well, the baby's going to reject the nipple. But when I very gently put my hand on the mother's shoulder and I have her sit back and get comfortable and then teach her to breathe, the breathing creates the relaxation response. It creates the South Pole. And it actually allows for the baby to soften into the mother. And Erin, I've watched so many mothers who couldn't breastfeed. All of a sudden, wow, that's such a great latch. Wow, my child just nursed for 15 minutes. And so that's sort of the short story of the bigger story, which is children are always going to be messy. They're going to color outside the lines. They're going to do the things that they're not supposed to do. And our job is to recognize that's who they are. And our job is to not see their adrenaline and meet it with ours and make a trauma case out of something that's just who they are, right? Provide the safety because kids are going to be messy and they're going to do stupid things and they're going to do things that they're not supposed to do. And they're going to be impulsive and they're going to not think, just like we are that way. And so the more we can provide a sort of a South Pole environment where children can lean into the exploration of their personality, that's how the children will grow an emotional quotient. That's how they'll get their emotional intelligence because they'll feel safe to screw up, right? And as long as we're making it safe enough for them to screw up, they're going to know their regulatory systems by knowing how far they can go. But not because we kept yelling at them and screaming at them and reacting to them, but because we actually provided them with a safe space to screw up. And whether they're 2 or 12 or 18, or as many parents know, 22 or 32, right? Our job as the adult is to provide as much of that South Pole as possible. Breathing is one way to do it. It's just one way. And again, many of us as adults who have kids are coming from our own traumas. So when we see stuff go messy, it just raises our trauma, and that's our job to work on that so that we can bring to our kids what wasn't done to us. Right? You hear that saying, what do you hear? I'm never going to raise my kid the way my parents raised me. And how many times does that work? Not very often, right? So the goal is to do the work as we're talking about. Do the breathing, do the trauma work, do the self-discovery work, do the inner work. Because if you do that, your child will settle right into your environment because you're growing too. And I don't know any parent who doesn't have to grow as their children grow up. Parents have to grow up also. And we can't forget that. We have to encourage that process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Dr. Larry. So this might be a surprise to you, but I ask 8 rapid fire questions of all of our guests at the end of the show. These are just designed to give us a little bit more insight into who you are and what makes you tick. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, number one, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
My first answer is the sun.
Nice. All right, number two, tell us something most people don't know about you.
I have a big theater background. I used to act and sing and perform, and I miss it a lot.
Hmm, same actually.
Great.
All right, number three, if I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
Um, we are the children.
Nice. All right. Number four, what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
Oh, wow. Probably pizza.
Mm, good New Yorker. All right. What is the most influential book you've ever read?
Wow. Hold on, let me go into my files. I don't have one yet. Give me a second. Um, I I would say in the last 8 or 9 years, there are two books that I'm going to come up with. One is called The Power of Now, and the other one is called The Call.
Mm,
And those have really shaped a lot of my inner work in the last 8 or 9 years.
yeah, Eckhart Tolle. Yeah. Okay. What does the word revolution mean to you?
Evolution.
Revolution.
Evolution.
Evolution.
It
Got
means evolution. So
it.
evolution, not revolution,
Yeah.
right? So there's this saying by R. Buckminster Fuller,
Mm,
which I can never quote exactly. If you want to change things, if you're unhappy with the way things are, don't try and change the existing system.
mm,
Build a new system to make the old system obsolete.
mhm.
So instead of revolution, I believe in evolution. Create
Nice.
something new. Let the other thing do what it's going to do. Let it die. But I prefer evolution.
Nice. All right. What does the word remedy mean to you?
Ah, remedy. Potential.
Mhm.
It means potential.
And lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
Ah. Um, life, life is really here for us to grow and to do our inner work. And I have found that the more you do your inner work, the more you'll get to a peaceful life.
Mm,
And we are guided, we are held, we are loved, and to make sure of that in the process of doing our inner work.
Wonderful. So, Dr. Larry Palevsky, where can people find out more information about you?
So I have a website, Dr. Palevsky, PALEVSKY.com. I have an Instagram page, dr.palevsky. I have a Telegram page, Palevsky. And I have a lot of other links where you can find me. I do a podcast every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern called Critically Thinking with Dr. T and Dr. P. That's Dr. Sherry Tenpenny. And then once a month, we have the great Five Docs podcast with Dr. Tenpenny, Dr. Northrup, Dr. Merritt, and Dr. Madday. There are a lot of videos and interviews on my website. I have newsletters, so go there and have fun listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Larry. It has been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.
With hope as a guiding light, through darkest days we'll fight the night. With a whole lot of passion, with a whole lot of truth, the remedy revolution is here for you.